Welcome to the T1 Determined podcast, where we bridge the conversation of type 1 diabetes and endurance. I'm Joseph Anthony Marcello, a runner, a weightlifter, a mountaineer, and athlete. As someone living with T1D, I'm on a mission to uncover and share science-backed information that drives optimal performance and longevity. And as a storyteller, I'm here to explore and share incredible feats in T1D sports physiology. Let's tackle this together. Today, we're joined by the inspiring T1D fitness trainer, Leanna Buchina. Diagnosed at the age of 5 in 1984 and now living with T1D for over 40 years, Leanna once navigated a world with less technology, leading to inconvenient methods of T1D management. Leanna found freedom years later through the discipline of fitness and weightlifting, transforming her journey from a life of rigid rules to one of empowered, calculated control. As we build this podcast from the ground up, your support is crucial for our continued growth. Wherever you're listening, please share this episode and others with anyone you think might benefit. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X at T1D_endurance, on Facebook at T1 Determined, and visit our website, T1Determined.net. Before we dive in, a quick but vital disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor. The topics discussed and the recommendations shared by myself and our guests are personal experiences and not medical prescriptions. Use this information in a way that best suits you, and always consult your healthcare team and medical professionals before making any changes to your daily routines, management, or therapies. And now, my conversation with Leanna Buchina. Leanna, thank you very much for joining us today on the T1 Determined podcast. We have so much to talk about, so much to dive in. I think you personally are such a unique story to what can be done with type 1 diabetes, from having it for so many years and clearly taking a fitness route from what you've learned over those years to then better yourself as you continue to live with type 1 diabetes. I'd love to start just as simple as possible with a little explanation about yourself and your diagnosis story. You got, I believe, diagnosed in a time period where type 1 diabetes management is completely different, a world of difference than what it is today. So I'd love to learn a little bit about you and then what it was like managing type 1 diabetes before the modern technology existed.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I know that you interview a lot of significant athletes with a lot of accomplishments. And so, yeah, just middle-aged mom trying to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 5. It was 1984. My dad had type 1, and we knew that there was a small chance that any of his kids would develop type 1 as well. And there was one night when I remember getting up and asking for water 3 or 4 times. And my mom thought, well, this is odd, but let's just check and see. And, at that time they had those strips that you peed on that told you if there was glucose in your blood or not. And I remember that came out, the little strip turned like brown immediately. And it's like, oh no. So I don't remember a lot about that hospital visit. But we went to the hospital and, by this time my mom and dad had a reasonable idea of how to manage it. My dad had type 1 for a few years by this point. But again, it was still new. When he was diagnosed, there was no home glucometer option, which, and you can imagine now being used to our continuous glucose monitors that give us a reading every 5 minutes, but that wasn't available. There weren't any home glucometers then. So again, things had come a long way, but my mom and dad had kind of figured out how to manage his insulin with and diet with both the long and the short-term acting insulin, and then inserting different like carbohydrate, fat, and protein exchanges in that timing window in order to hopefully maximize, steady blood sugars. That concept now is just so odd to me because we do have so much freedom with the rapid and the quick-acting insulins.
I believe even the lifespan, and you can tell me more about this, the lifespan of the long-acting insulin and then the short-acting, which is different than today's short-acting, which is rapid-acting. Long-acting, which today can go for 24 hours, sometimes even 48 or down to 12. But in 1984, that was approximately around 8 hours, and then the
Right.
short acting was 4 hours, where it had its peak in 2 hours and then was out of the system in 4, which is a completely different world, um, than today, where you have long acting that can last up to 24 hours and without the pump.
Right, right. And the way to insert food into there, and again, this was the mid '80s where we had, demonized fats, right? So everything was super carb heavy, but low fat everything. And the exchange system was what was introduced as far as like how to eat in order to again maintain that same glycemic load that in theory fit in with your peaks and valleys with the two different types of insulin. But there was no option of like skipping a meal because you didn't feel like it because you had that long acting insulin in your system still. And there was no like, oh, I want to eat a few more carbs. I'll just take a little more insulin for it. Like that was not even a thought back then. So yeah, everything was very regimented. Some people, if you go to their house, they have, serving tongs to put noodles on their plate, but we had a measuring cup, right? So everything I ate from when I was 5 on was measured, and but that's how it had to be. I mean, there was no other option. The exchange system was interesting because you could exchange things in different categories. So you could exchange like a piece of bread for a roll, things like that, but you couldn't exchange like a bread for a fruit. So it wasn't simply carbs, proteins, and fats. It was, again, we knew that certain things had, the different glycemic load, which hit your system at different intervals. And then trying to, again, maximize the timing of when everything hit your system with the ebbs and flows of the insulin that you took. So again, it was a lot of detail oriented. And I mean, thanks to my mom, we would not have survived.
Being a 5-year-old, it seems like your mom and your dad, from your dad living with type 1 diabetes, had this knowledge of what to do, at least how to manage it with what the means were at the time. But being so young, at what point did you start to take it into your own hands? So you know a lot about this now. 5 years old, this could go right through you. At what point, at what age did all of this start to make sense to you, even if it was later on?
I come from a family of rule followers, which is probably a good thing. Um, and I got diabetes the summer before I started kindergarten.
Or
And going to kindergarten, I mean, of course, you can imagine all the detailed information that went into talking to the school nurse and to the teachers and to really everybody in the school that knew, like, hey, look out for these symptoms that she's experiencing this, then you need to pull her, check her blood sugar. But I remember in first grade, I had a little watch. I think had a Snoopy watch on it, and it would ding at like 10:30, and that was my signal to like stop and eat peanut butter crackers, right? So I remember doing little things like that. I was probably, I don't know, second grade when I started giving myself shots. But by that time, I mean, you don't really, you know what it feels like and you're not scared of it. Right.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but of course I knew how to draw it up, but I mean, there's such a level of preciseness was involved because the nice little motors on our insulin pumps weren't a thing. I mean, it was just, you rolled the insulin in the vial in your hand and then you inserted the air and then turned it upside down and drew out like the precise amount and, hoped it was within the margin of error that would meet your macro exchange requirements. So again, a lot of room for small little errors but that's how it was. I mean, there was no other option. And we did it and we tried to live as normal of a life as possible.
I think I mean, it's the truth, but it's a wonderful mindset to live with, that there is no other option than to manage it that way. Obviously the option is illness or worse. And with a management that is so, there can be mistakes made very easily, because especially without CGMs, how is using so the concept of trends is relatively within the last decade to 2 decades, got introduced into the type 1 diabetic lifestyle with the introduction of continuous glucose monitors. What was your experience before that term trends came to existence, where you actually had to manage your glucose with the glucometer and could be at 100, then 30 minutes later at 130, but then another 30 minutes later back down to 90, and you don't know the in between of what's happening at all versus what you're doing? What was that experience like growing up?
Well, I remember that there would be certain time periods, after you go to the doctor and get your A1C, and it's like, okay, so when is she running high? When is she running low? And then it was literally like a glucometer check every couple of hours. And that's, my mom coming up to school and checking my blood sugar and then writing down that data. So it was essentially kind of like I guess we could equate it now to like a basal test, but without the technology, right? So it's kind of like, let's just see how the timing of her carbs and the exchange system and the insulin, how is that affecting her? And are we seeing trends that we have high numbers at 10 o'clock every day? Right. So, I mean, it was, a solid week of data that you hoped had some trends that you could see, but, it was not easy. It was not simple like it is today. Um, but again, that was what we had to do. And I think at the time, somebody, the expectancy of what a type 1 could do that was diagnosed in the 80s was not even thought of like we think of it today, right? So kids that have been diagnosed today, they have very few limitations about what they can do with their entire lives with this disease. So, but in the 80s, that wasn't necessarily the case, right? And once you kind of got everything in set as far as like managing the timing of your food and your insulins and kept it relatively steady. Like if you could master that, it's like, don't change anything. Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't play sports a lot as a child because again, that was just one more variable that you're throwing into this very complex process of trying to manage everything. And that was okay. But you did what you needed to do. And again, like you treated the significant highs, you treated the rapid lows, and then you tried to maintain, just a, a nice little window. I think now people try to maintain a blood sugar that's probably a little lower and a little narrower of a window than we tried to in the 80s because it just, it was impossible.
And yet you have
Without
the
that
ability
technology.
to today,
Yes.
and the the treatment and the different types of insulin, the different types of technology with CGMs and pumps and loop systems and omnipods, the variety, there's so many different options that individuals can take today. It seems like back in the 80s and the 90s, there was only very few options. You were only able to do what you could do. And if you were
Right.
managing it well, it was don't change anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I want to commend you for sticking to that discipline, especially your parents as well, because that requires a lot of discipline that has probably been instilled in you growing up and into your life. And I would love to learn at what point did that transition into fitness? At what point in your life? Because I remember when we originally spoke, you told me that there was a transformational period in your life, and it's been recently that you've looked into diet, nutrition, and the CrossFit gym. So I would love to learn about how you got into fitness, and then take it from there as to what you've been doing over the past couple years.
Well, I didn't work out until my early 30s, the and the reason, I don't really know that there was a reason other than I didn't enjoy it, right? I didn't find anything that I really enjoyed doing.
Right.
You had the whole blood sugar fluctuation option thrown in there, and it was like, it's just easier not to, right? But I joined a YMCA. My husband was active duty Marine Corps and he was gone a lot. And I was like, I just want 30 minutes to myself, where the kids can play safely down the hall with the great childcare and I can make a grocery list by myself, right? I've got, a few minutes to think. So I'd go walk on the treadmill and kind of get things prepped and lined up for the week. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like I can walk for 30 minutes. It didn't have a huge impact on blood sugar, thank goodness. And it just kind of went from there. From there, I started going to group exercise classes and then started looking up ways to become more sensitive to insulin, which of course the weightlifting came into play there, and then that just kind of eventually developed into really habit of exercising every day. Now the tricky part is also growing up in the 80s, you see how timing is so important, and I found that working out around 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, I had very similar results with the diabetes. So I kind of stuck to that. And it's like, hey, if I can get my workout in, a mix of, some good cardio with some at the time what I thought were heavy weights, kind of get that mix going. I have very predictable blood sugars. And I think the predictability is key here. And again, this was before the continuous glucose monitors or before the accurate ones even. Um, so while there were things that could help, they weren't near as accurate as the ones today. So the I don't know if you can use brand names. Anyway, the Dexcom that I have is far superior than any CGM that I had before that. But again, having a CGM was nice. I mean, you had to calibrate it twice a day, and it showed you trends, but not necessarily pinpoint accuracy about like, oh, hey, it says I'm 100, but well, I could really be like 160, but it's level. It's not going anywhere. So I mean, again, great data tool, but not as accurate as what we have today.
And
But
what did you at first find when you got into walking and then into weightlifting within, say, you start at 9, um, within an hour or 2 hours of actually working out, the time frame that you are working out, did you measure during that? And then what did you discover your blood sugars were doing actively while participating?
So that definitely took a lot of trial and error. There are a lot of failures along the way, and I think that's to be expected. And it's okay to have those failures because through those
Completely.
failures, you take that data in, and then you can make small adjustments. But it was one of those like, hey, have I eaten or have I not eaten? And then do I need to disconnect my pump? If I disconnect it for that hour, I'm probably going to be okay later. Or do I take, half a unit now and then disconnect and then reconnect after? So, I mean, this is going to be such an individualized thing, but once you can figure it out, you're golden, right? So I figured out that like working out fasted and disconnecting my pump for that hour and then reconnecting like immediately after and taking like a small bolus of insulin, that made things manageable and a little more predictable. So it's like, hey, I figured this out again. Like we're in the golden zone. Like let's not change anything. Um, so again, a lot of trial and error of just a lot of, and you're always going to have outliers, right? I mean, there are 60 different things that affect blood sugar, and we usually deal with like the top five.
Yep.
um, but that's okay. Again, a lot of trial and error, and you treat things when you need to treat it, whether that's, sitting in the corner of the gym eating jelly beans while you're watching everybody else there, burning the calories off that you'd like to be burning off, and instead you're having to, eat a handful of jelly beans in the moment. So, that's never fun, but you learn and you treat the outliers because they're going to happen, and that's okay.
Completely agree. I am very much under the mindset that there is no failure, that failing is only collecting data, as he said,
Right.
and then that data that you collect can help you then achieve and succeed afterwards. So it's like everything that you do. And one thing to stress about this is the time that goes into it. And you've probably experienced this from when you've started your fitness routines, your routines have probably evolved so much to what they are now, and how long it takes you to actually learn what that trial and error is. Could take you maybe like 2 weeks to realize that your glucose was spiking at the start of your workout because you were having a coffee right before your workout, for example.
Right. Right. Again, and things are always changing, as I get older, you have different hormonal influences that change throughout the course of your life. And, you know, finding the balance that fits is great, but also being able to adapt when those changes happen. That's just as important as well. Um, and again, just knowing your body and making those mistakes or those errors or finding the things that don't really work for you, the more you know your body, the more you're going to be able to treat and prevent some of the outliers. Um, and and that's just part of this great little disease. I feel like I know my body fairly well because I've had to. You don't really have the option not to. So it's like, hey, if I have coffee with cream in it and then work out an hour later, what's going to happen? Right. And even what would happen 10 years ago is different than what's going to happen today. And, and that's just part of the learning process, is like taking all this data that's kind of constantly running in the back of your mind and applying it to the things that you can control. That's what's going to give you the best outcome. And also accepting that there are some things that are going to happen that you have no idea why they happen. And being okay with that. That's the hard thing because, you want to have the same inputs and get the same outputs. And sometimes that doesn't happen, right? And it could be because you've got an equipment malfunction or because you're eating a lot of scar tissue and you're just not absorbing things as well. or it's hotter outside, or it's colder outside, or you're working out at a different time, or you're under a lot of stress, or you're under as much stress. There's so many different things that play into your insulin sensitivity. You want to keep it as level as possible, but you also have to give yourself grace to understand that there are things that are going to hit you and it's okay, right? Treat it and move on.
Yep. I think I'd like to allude to a previous guest of this podcast, Ben Wessel, stated it perfectly when he said that you want to identify situations versus trends. And
Right.
situations, it comes back to what you can control versus what you cannot control. Situations are outliers. They're events that happen. You have your routine, but your blood sugar won't act a certain way every single time. It could be an adrenaline dump from stress. It could be the weather, as you said, is too hot outside, and that's a situation that's unrelated to your management. So there, for the several outliers, there is no need to change your management. But if it then happens again and again and again and again, then you identify that as a trend. Again, it's data collection, and you start to figure out where I can adjust my needs.
Right. Right. Definitely. And, I say for the people that are recently diagnosed with this, take your time. Like, it's going to take a while to get to know your body. But again, look for those trends. Don't have the hyperreactivity of, oh, this happened one day, so therefore I'm not going to do anything about it, or I'm not going to do this one activity that led to this one thing ever again. That, because that might not be the case, right? Because there's so many things that play into it are just unaware of. It's impossible to know all of that. So again, like you said, look for trends, because the outlying situations are going to happen, and you treat it, and then you again look for trends. Once you find that trend, then you make the inputs different than the ones that you can't control. um I don't want to, it's never a guessing game. There's always some science that goes into it. It's also an art too, right? You have to understand the finesse of how the scientific factors affect you, and then the art of putting it all together and creating this masterpiece of a great A1C, right?
And that's when you get excited. I love the analogy. We're basically all just artists.
Right. Right.
So when you got into fitness and exercise around your 30s, what has that then transitioned to what it looks like today? Over those years, how have you developed and evolved? And it seems like you were always in control of your glucose, but you really started to, let's say, hyper focus when you've got into the fitness realm. Um, Over the period of your 30s to where you are now, what does that look like for your personal transformation?
Well, you know, having the situation of managing diabetes based on timing of the insulin in the 80s,
Mhm.
it kind of led me to think, okay, hey, this time is a good time for me to work out, because again, hey, pretty consistent outcomes. This is good. Let's stick with it. And we were new to an area, and we had just moved, and my kids wanted to do swim team, but that was my workout time, and it was like, I hate to give that up. And then I needed to be at the pool with them for 3 hours every morning in the summer, and it was like, oh, that's really gonna mess things up. Like, what can I do about this? So I put a little feeler out to see if any of the moms wanted to work out on the pool deck while the kids were swimming. That way I could still get my workout in, and the kids could swim, and everything was good. And that eventually led into me having my own fitness company where I did small group and personal training. So, I love the knowledge of anatomy, physiology. That's something I've always been interested in. And this was just, I would read articles about this just for fun. And it's like, hey, how can I apply this? Right. And just being able to see directly how things affected me, because you hear so many people say, like, oh, this is going to be great for insulin sensitivity. And it's like, well, unless you have somebody that can know exactly how much insulin they're taking, you don't
Yeah.
fully know. So I would I'm not conduct experiments, but again, say, I know for a fact, this is how much insulin I took after this workout with this protein powder that came in. Like, what is my outcome now? And
Yeah.
being able to significantly measure that made a big deal. But when you have people relying on you to teach them some of these things, you have to be an expert in it yourself. And while I'm certainly far from an expert, I feel like the knowledge base that I gained since I was 5 has definitely given me a broader understanding of how metabolism works, how different foods, timing, macros, workout styles affect all this that goes into keeping you at your healthiest, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I'd like
so
to definitely like to double click on this real quick. So when you're educating yourself with these articles and then becoming you're working out with others and desire to become the fitness trainer, first question that comes to my mind is, are you working with other type 1s? And then the second question is, are you learning stuff that is about the overall human physiology and relating it to type 1? Or are you reading, educating yourself about the type 1 physiology, relating it to yourself, and then relating it to those who aren't type 1? I think my point with this sort of question is learning about the human body, the full human body, a well rounded learning of all of the physiology then can be translated to knowledge about type 1. They are sometimes seen as two separate things, but they have the correlation of you can learn about what happens to an athlete without type 1, use that information and kind of twist it, knowing your knowledge about you and your type 1, and notice how you can react to something very similar.
right, that's exactly right. Seeing what the mainstream knowledge is about anatomy, physiology, hormonal shifts, metabolic health, and then seeing what nuances apply to type 1 and where the things that I can control kind of apply and like kind of fill in some of those gaps, right? I think it's important not to just find one source and get all of your information from, but just be very well rounded in where you're getting all your information from. So not just sticking with one, celebrity or fitness influencer, but looking at a lot of it and kind of taking in the the culmination of what everybody has to say together, and then knowing what I know about my body and type 1, how does that affect me and how can I make this make sense to my clients, right? How can I share this brief knowledge and add in the pieces of the puzzle with the type 1 and then um, disseminate that into my clients. So that's kind of the route that I took, and I remember drawing glucose graphs on my chalkboard in my home gym form. And it's like, hey, here's what happens when you eat a high glycemic carb and a low glycemic carb, and like, here's where your insulin is going to kick in, and here's where you're going to have to take more insulin, and insulin is a growth hormone, and just knowing all of that and helping them apply it to their real world situations. So again, I don't want to say that I am grateful that I have diabetes, but I'm grateful for what I've been able to learn and what I've been able to pass on because of it.
Hmm. And it's the mindset of, again, control what you can control, but you can still be healthy in all other aspects of your life. And have diabetes can do what it will do to you, but that doesn't stop you if you're in better shape from being healthy in the other aspects. You are physically ready to take on some complications, or you just won't be in a worse situation than you would be if you didn't focus on your health.
Right. There are a lot of things that I can't control about my health, and I definitely followed a lot of the rules when I was younger, but there was a lot of times that I didn't as well, in that rebellious teenage years. It's like, well, if I'm going to get suboptimal results anyway, like why not get a candy bar and a Mountain Dew on the way to school, right? Um, don't do that. But so yeah, I definitely had some years of like, man, this is a lot of work and I'm tired. I am mentally and physically fatigued from putting all the effort into it just to get mediocre results. Um, so, I went through some of that, and again, a learning process, a learning stage. Um, but, you kind of grow through these learning situations and say, oh, well, that wasn't a good idea, but what did I take away from that?
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, when I, when I wanted to when my husband and I wanted to start having a family, that's when it's like, hey, let's really, really hone in on this. Again, no CGMs were available, but let's see how low I can get the A1C so we can, look for, um, any future family plans coming along. And
Yeah.
him deploying in the Marine Corps definitely put some time limits on, like, hey, we gotta, you're about to leave. So we need to see what we can do now, while I'm still at relatively good enough health.
Yeah.
And through the years, I've had some diabetic retinopathy that has been treated, some kidney function's not optimal, but everything is steady. And while I might not have significant control over those things, I can work out every day. I can lift something heavy. I can do something good for my, you know, osteoporosis, should it have to stave that off, right? I want to be able to, when my kids call and say, "Hey mom, let's take the grandkids to Disney World," I want to just hop up and be able to go and not think twice about it. Like, oh, is it, am I physically up to chasing kids around Disney World? Although I don't know that I've ever been up to that. But,
Yeah.
just being able to have that option, right? Just working out gives me a lot of ability to have as many options as possible for me. Um, and that might not be the same for everybody, but again, that's okay. I want to be able um, to run around with the dogs and to get the tennis ball out from under the couch the 800th time my dog knocks it under there without, getting fatigued or, still being able to get up and down off the floor. I want to be able to have that option because, I might not can do anything about, the kidney disease, but I can stay active, right? There are certain things that I can definitely prioritize despite the limiting factors that I can't.
Yeah, completely. And I think for our audience, it would be great if you could explain what your fitness routine looks like. For those, and again, you hit on this topic of individuality. I believe, and this is why I'm welcoming onto the podcast a variety of so many different sports, because all of us have our own goals, we have our own interests, own passions, and everything. And even training for a sport, a lot of it could look like the same gym workout, but you go to the gym, each person at the gym is doing a different workout. So I'd love to learn about what you specifically do for your goals, and then how you incorporate that into a little bit of your client work as well.
Um, so right now I'm working out with a great group of people at a great gym in my city, and it's definitely got some heavy lifting and it's got, a big cardio component. And I've got a lot of equipment at home, but there's something that I enjoy about working out with other people. That gives me like a little motivation to push a little bit harder, to go a little bit further. But one thing that I think a lot of your true athletes are going to have that I don't is this competitive drive, right? I don't have that, and that's just me. If somebody wants
Which is
to
honestly probably a blessing.
So, I mean, if somebody wants to outlift me, go for it. It's like I'm playing the long game. I'm looking at, my competitive drive is, having a great A1C. And sometimes that's not going to correlate with, maxing out every weight I can max out that day because I've either had higher blood sugars over the night and I'm just tired, right? And that's okay. If I've done a couple of tough mutters, and I don't know if you've ever done a tough mutter or an obstacle course race, but there's a lot of teamwork involved. And I love those races because you weren't out for just yourself, right? Your goal was to kind of get your team across the finish line.
Yeah.
Um, but
What
it's
does a Tough
definitely
Mudder include for somebody who I've heard of it, but I don't really exactly know what it entails?
the tough mutters, obstacle course racing. The tough mutters are between 12 and 14 miles, and they have different obstacles along the way. So you'll, run for half a mile, and then there's an obstacle, whether it's, crawling, like doing an arm crawl under barbed wire, and then like crawling up a sewage, or not a sewage pipe, but, a big pipe, and then like dropping into water, or doing monkey bars over who knows what, or going into like a slide down an ice bath, or, a lot of low crawling, a lot of getting muddy,
That sounds
a lot of
gruesome.
fun. But there's a lot of things that you had to rely on a team for. You've got a big ramp and you've got to run up it and then get up and over it. And you can't do it unless there's people at the top to help you. So, again, those were always a lot of fun. But
How did you did for there it seemed like they happened for a duration of 12, 14 miles. It must have been several hours. How did you manage? Did you have glucose on you for when you went low, or how did you manage preventing going high at certain points?
Well, the first one I did, it was definitely the longest event that I'd done. And, I had all of the stuff, right? The glucose tablets and the quick acting sugar. But then I also thought, well, let me just not wear my pump and see how that goes. So the first one I did, we would stop at the beginning of each obstacle and stop and check blood sugar, because again, this was before the Dexcom. And so you just stop and check, like, hey, where am I? Do I feel like I'm rising? Am I falling? Is the stress adrenaline kicking in, or is the heat and the exercise and the outside kicking in? Like, where am I going? Right. So you just, it's like, hey, let's stop and check. Okay. So you're 180 now, but you hadn't had anything to eat for a couple of hours, but you're outside. Like, let me reconnect for a little bit. And then, like, the next obstacle, hey, let's stop and check now, see where we are. So there's a lot of planning that went into that. My husband's been a great caretaker and, understands type 1 so well. So he was, right there with me to assist and to, carry the blood sugar bag when I got tired of carrying it, stuff like that. But yeah, just a lot of, like, stopping the race, having to, let diabetes take priority, and then continuing on. So, I it's like, well, I'm not gonna be the first one, but I
Yeah.
don't care about winning the race. I care about finishing it without passing out, right?
Yep.
So
It
either
seems
way.
like it's a combination of trusting your body, knowing again your routines, disciplines, what your body does during specific activities, and trusting your own feeling of yourself, while
Right.
also having the support system of your husband nearby. You have somebody close to you who could also be looking at you and trying to see externally, making sure that you're okay as well.
Yeah. We had a lot of my clients went on the Tough Mudders together, and they all know I'm diabetic and know where my emergency supplies are and what to do. So that's always a good help to have a community around you that can support you, that understand, that are willing and able to learn how to help.
Mhm.
A lot of times you get people just know little bits about diabetes, and that's fine. I don't have any ill will towards the people that are like, oh, your blood sugar's low. Do you need insulin? Like, well, no, I need the opposite of that right now, but thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
People just know tiny bits of it, and they try to help when they can. But it's actually taken a long time to really, you know, open up and not, sit in the corner and try to, like, eat jelly beans so nobody asks what's wrong. Now it's just like, hey, I'm just gonna sit down because I need to right now. And the hard thing about time sports and a lot of what I do is like, hey, you've got a certain amount of time to get a certain amount of work in, but it's like, oh, I really need 20 carbs in 20 minutes, or I could eat 40 carbs and be back on the floor in like 2 or 3 minutes, but then I'm going to rebound after. And is that worth it? You know, so knowing how your body is going to handle these different situations, again, that's key. And the only way you learn that is through experience. You can read all the books and follow everything that the books say, but there's going to be outlying factors that affect you, and they're going to affect you differently at different times in your life. And just learning how to maneuver around those is always a good thing.
Constant calculation.
Right.
That's
Right.
great.
I say managing type 1 diabetes, it's kind of like doing all of your daily activities, but while bouncing a balloon in the air, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's, you kind of know where it's going, you know how to keep it afloat, but you can never really forget about it, right? So you're going to work and brushing your teeth and eating lunch, but, taking care of the kids, but you're still bouncing that balloon in the air, right? So it always has a piece of your focus. And I don't want to say that that's fortunate or unfortunate, but that's the reality of it.
Yep. It's
And
always
and
the best.
again, learning how to I don't want to say stand up for yourself, but own it and say, hey, I didn't sleep good last night. I know we had plans at 10 o'clock in the morning, but I can't make it. Having the ability to say things like that has taken me a long time, because you can't necessarily look at me and see that I have diabetes, right? You can't look at somebody and know that there's something on the inside that doesn't feel right, because they had high blood sugar because their pump malfunctioned the day before, and their blood has been like the viscosity of pancake batter for the last,
Yeah.
several hours. I mean, you can't really look at people and tell that. And, but it's taken me a while to, up until my 40s, to say, hey, I don't feel good. Blood sugars have been crazy the last few days. I'm trying to hone in on it, but I'm just not up to it. sorry, I know I had a commitment, but I've got to break. Um, and
Again,
that's taken
that
me a long time.
that's listening to your body, and then also I think and again, I wanna commend you, you found the trust within yourself because it's very hard to tell people. I'll give an example of the other day. Somebody asked me, "What's the most as a filmmaker? What's the most exciting project you're working on?" So I started talking to them about the documentary and that I'm making about climbing Denali with type 1 diabetes. This individual had no clue I was a type 1 diabetic. He said, "You have diabetes. You look so skinny. How do you have diabetes?"
Right.
And and
Right.
again, it wasn't this person was a very funny person. They didn't mean anything wrong by it. And it goes to your point of being comfortable with expressing yourself with type 1 diabetes. You don't wanna be defined by type 1 diabetes, you don't wanna let it define who you are, but
Mhm.
it inevitably and undeniably is a piece of you, there's nothing you can do to reverse that.
Yeah.
So, again, want to commend you and just want to double click on the mindset, if we can kind of talk about for those who are newly diagnosed or those who may be mentally struggling,
Mhm.
with having diabetes and socializing with others, especially in sports. The last thing you want to be is, for another example, a kid on a soccer field, and you have to run to the sidelines because you need to manage your glucose. And in your mind, you would be like, "Well, if I pass out, I pass out," and that's the last thing that we want
Right.
to happen. And
Right.
I'd love to talk about dive into this little mindset and mental health aspect of it.
Well, that's so diabetes burnout is real. And if you haven't experienced it, you probably will at some point. And, they say it takes what, between 2 and 3 hours a day of decision making just to manage type 1. And I believe it. You've always, again, that bouncing balloon, it's always in the back of your mind. Like, how is doing this next activity, or even if it's not an active activity, but how are my next couple hours going to affect my blood sugars now and 4 to 5 hours from now? And just the amount of stress when you constantly got something in the back of your mind just rolling that you can't forget. Um, that's just that's just such a part of what we deal with. And that's where another thing, I think the outlet of exercise or any type of stress relief really helps once you can figure out, hey, how and when can I work out to, have predictable outcomes with blood sugar, but being able to have that physicality, right? Being able to accomplish a goal of hitting the gym a certain number of times per week, or, getting some laps in at the pool, uh, whatever it is, just to help that mental piece. I mean, we know that exercise is phenomenal for mental health and mental strength. And the more we can do that, I think the easier that burnout can be, right? It's just do something that is good for your body, even if you can't do all the things that are good for your body because they're not in your control right now. So getting that, having somebody to talk to, another type 1, or another, if you have a family member with type 1, find another family member who has a child with type 1 and just say, "Oh, I just need help. Blood sugars have been crazy and we don't really know what to do. And we're managing the best we can, and it doesn't seem like it's good enough." Find a source, find somebody else that's been through a similar struggle, and lean on that community. And I think that, you know, being in this age of being able to digitally connect with people 24/7 has made a huge impact on that. Like, you're being able to connect type 1 athletes, where before, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I really want to do this race, but I don't feel like I can safely do it with type 1." And it's like, "Oh, well, hey, here's here's this guy that has a collection of people that have done all these significant things, and here's how they've managed it." And I think, having people with commonalities like that just gives us a little bit of hope, like, hey, we do struggle with this, but we can still accomplish really good things.
I completely agree. And again, it's such an individualized condition where what's happening to me is different than what's happening to you. So at times you may not want to feel like isolated, that you can't reach out to other type 1s because so many type 1s are managing it differently, but that's not the truth. The type 1 community is astonishing.
Mhm.
athletic or not. There's a whole support group out there, and again, I think you highlight the point of find what works for you. And find there are groups. The internet is wonderful. If Facebook doesn't work, then find something else that works. Reach out to people. There are so many type ones going through similar experiences, even though they are different than your specific experience. It is a huge network of empathy.
Right, right. You know, you can sometimes you just need to complain about it a little bit, right? Not like woe is me, but just like, oh, this is just, I've had an exhausting week dealing with this and I feel like I'm having higher numbers than normal and I can't figure out why. And, but then to hear somebody saying, hey, like I'm up through a phase two and now I was able to kind of hone it back in. It's like, oh, well, good. Like that gives me like a little bit of hope for my next phase and just the strength to keep going. I think we are designed to do better when we are in community with each other and finding that community, I think has been a great thing. So again, you can complain, you can say, "Hey, I got a great A1C that was lower than I expected," or "I just accomplished this, significant athletic event."
Mhm.
And most people would think, "Oh, well, that's cool that you did this hike," but it's like, "No, I did this hike with diabetes, right? I carried this 100-pound diabetes rucksack with me the whole time I was there, and we both made it, and we both survived, right?" Um, so it's finishing is great, but like finishing with as much again, knowledge and the ability to carry that type 1 is significant in itself. And, again, I'm not an athlete, I'm not a competitor. Um, so for me, like just finishing something that's kind of out of the ordinary is good enough for me. It's like, hey, I did this and blood sugar didn't go crazy, or well, it did go crazy, but fixed it, finished it, and I know kind of what went wrong and I won't do that again.
Yeah. I would like to say that I personally think that you are an athlete for doing what you're doing, especially with type 1 diabetes. Even if not a competitive athlete, just a athlete in the simplest definition. And from having type 1 diabetes from the 1980s to now, over the progression of technology, and how it's managed today and the discipline that went into it then that you still have installed in you now, I what would you say to somebody who is newly diagnosed living in today's world with type 1?
Well, the main things that I have found that really throw me for a loop now is that when your pump malfunctions, when your CGM malfunctions, you need to know how to handle things, quote, the old school way. You can go to any drugstore and buy a glucometer or strips for $10, $15, right? So if you are on your way to a race and things don't feel right, you can't figure it out, like, "Oh, well, I don't have any more backup supplies," or "I've already exhausted all my backup CGMs that I've taken with me." Like, knowing how to manage it, right? Like, having that backup insulin pen or vial with you and having that backup plan because your equipment is gonna fail at some point, and whether it's your fault or the equipment's fault or whatever, it's gonna fail, but knowing how to manage things without it, I think is something that, we really don't need to take for granted. And, you know, even me, I've had several situations, being in vacation where your stuff fails and it's like, I brought 3 times as much supplies as I needed for this vacation and I ran out of all of it, and being able to function with backup 1, backup 2, and backup 3. I mean, that's important. So um, make sure you know the basics and then you can manage it when the equipment fails, but also use the equipment as much as possible. Um, again, the Dexcom is such a reliable source. And again, it's not going to be super accurate. For some people, there's a definite, percentage of variance. But when you have the frame of reference of not having, a reading every 5 minutes, it's like, wow, this is phenomenal. Never in a million years did I think, oh, hey, I want to skip breakfast. I can. Or, and I want to have extra carbs and now I can. Let me just take a little extra insulin and then see what happens 5, 10, 20, 25, 30 minutes from now. Just having that data is so, so beneficial. So for people that are new, like master the basics and then you can kind of finesse the new stuff that comes along. But once you get your basal rate dialed in, whether that's your 24 acting or whether that's through a pump or whatever, once you get that dialed in, that's going to make managing things a whole lot easier. Because we know that you can even go into DKA without having super high blood sugars just because of the absence of insulin. Um, where where sometimes, long endurance athletes don't need insulin for the amount of time that they're running the race, but then it's like, hey, I haven't had any insulin for so long that now my body is reacting to that. But just knowing that basal rate, that it's important, that it once you can get that set, then everything else is so much easier to kind of make the minor adjustments around it. Um, so that's something I would advise new families with, like, get that basal rate set, don't give up on it. It can be different from month to month, but that's okay. Like, just get it as close as possible and then make small minor changes. One thing that sometimes I am guilty of is rage bolusing. I don't know if that's something that you've heard of, but it's
All
like,
the time.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I'm 200, and it's like, well, let me, I'll take the appropriate amount to get it back down into range, and then like 30 minutes later, it's still 200. It's like, okay, let me take more. Let me take more. And then before you know it, it's like, oh, great. Now I'm 40. Like,
Yeah.
I should have done that,
Now you're chugging down sugar, you're eating all the
Yeah.
candy that you shouldn't be eating, and
Right,
you're trying to
right.
stay afloat, and then it goes back up to 200, and you're at where
Yes.
you started.
Yeah. So, like, anything I can do to, keep everything in that nice idyllic range is good. So the rage goal listing is definitely a hard thing to fight sometimes because it's like, I don't know why it's high and I just want it to come down now. Um, and that can that can always be tricky too. So no rage bolusing. It never ends up well.
Yeah.
But yeah, get that basal rate set, and it's worth the time to figure out what what that background insulin looks like, because you can make all those minor adjustments once that background insulin variable is kind of taken out of the equation of what's wrong. So once that's set, I think that would be a good place to really start, because the background insulin, once you have a good feel of, you know, how much you take per hour in that background phase, like, that's really going to help you make the minor adjustments on top of that, knowing that variable is not into play anymore.
I think that's wonderfully said, and understandably knowing that your body will change over time, but if you are newly diagnosed, you do have a window of where your body will stay the same. So I
Mhm.
think to build off your point, it's very important to get the foundation of what it takes to find your steady rates. Um,
Right.
so you find out what you need, the amount of insulin that you need, and even though you may change in a year or two, you now know the process that it took to understand that rate
Right.
and your diet.
Right. And everybody's endocrinologist is going to have, the basal rate test, right? Where you go a certain number of hours without eating and then you see what your trends are. Um,
Yeah.
but that's one of those, the older I get, the more I realize, like, what I ate yesterday has an effect on my basal rate today.
Yeah.
But you've got glycogen stores that you've got to deal with, not only excess sugar in the blood, but like, how much glycogen are you hanging onto in your muscles, and how is that releasing? So did you eat something that's like high fat and high carb the day before, and that's going to, wreak havoc for the next 12 hours, so everybody's endocrinologist is going to have kind of their own matrix for figuring out that basal rate. It's going to be very similar, but once you can, like, put the work in, because once you can figure that out, everything else is a lot more doable.
I love that. Put the work in. I think that can be the quote. And so, thank you very much. As somebody who has been diagnosed and learned on technology, I've learned my management hand in hand with continuous glucose monitors,
Mm.
and I think the biggest takeaway that I'm of the many things that we've discussed today, but a huge takeaway for me personally is to understand what it's like without the technology. Understand at least how to manage it. The technology is phenomenal. It's very
Mhm.
close to being perfect, but it's not perfect yet. And frankly, humans aren't perfect. So
Right.
I don't think that there will ever be a point in history where we make something that is 100% perfect, because life itself just isn't perfect. So to
Mhm.
understand plan A, plan B, plan C, I think that's a wonderful takeaway. So I
Right.
want to thank you for the wealth of knowledge that you've given today, and I would love to just open it up now to anything that you want to add, anything that you want to say to anyone out there.
Well, I want to say that again, it took me a while to get to this point, but don't be afraid to take a day off from your routine, from your workout, right? If you don't feel good because you didn't sleep or blood sugar was too high or blood sugar was too low, it's okay to skip a workout, right? Like the sky is not falling and you're playing the long game, so get the consistent workouts in and it's okay if you miss a workout every now and then. Like that might not be in your training plan, especially if you're prepping for an event, but that training plan can change. And again, like give yourself grace to not have to say stick with the same schedule that somebody without the challenge might be able to manage a little bit better. If you're not feeling it or if you're like, hey, blood sugar's on the way up, I don't really know why, but do I want to work out right now or do I want to take a little bit of insulin, but do I want to work out with insulin on board and how's that going to affect me? Like if it's too complex, skip the day. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, we're playing the long game. We're playing for health and longevity. Um, and sometimes that means that your day to day is going to be different. And if you don't get your workout in that day, that's okay. And another thing I used to tell my clients and myself too, like put your workouts in your calendar. So if as somebody that doesn't enjoy working out as much, it's like, oh, well, let's go do this. You can just skip your workout. It's like, well, I can, but I really don't want to, right?
Yeah.
Or I already skipped one or two this week because I had blood sugar stuff. I really can't skip the third. Like it's okay to prioritize that over things that other people may not understand. I think taking care of our bodies is something that we are called to do. And I think that again, the more that we can do with the things we can control, the less the mental stress of the uncontrollable diabetes aspect is going to have on us.
Yeah.
So utilize that workout, but don't be afraid to say, "Hey, diabetes wise, I'm not feeling it today, and that's okay." Or I can't give 100% because I've got a little bit of insulin on board, and I know that if I just kind of give it 50%, I'll be okay for the next 6 hours. Um, that's okay too. So again, learn your body, and you're going to learn it just by living with this disease, and then make those minor adjustments. But don't be afraid to stand up for it and say, "I'm not feeling it. It's a diabetes thing." And that's okay, right? It took me a while to even wear my continuous glucose monitor where other people could see it. And I don't really know why. It's so silly because I don't mind if anybody asks me a question about it. It doesn't bother me, but I just didn't want the attention, right? Especially if it's like, oh, well, you're taking great care of yourself. And I'm like, well, little do you know, I spiked to 300 last night and I have no idea why, So, I kind of kept it hidden for a while, not against, not from close friends, of course, but from people that were just acquaintances. And it's like, oh, I don't really want people to ask me or about it, or don't want people to tell me that like drinking cinnamon water is going to cure my diabetes, right? Because we all get that at some point. we all get that. So anyway, yeah, maintain that work to get that basal rate set. Work with your endocrinologist. If you are not a fan of your endocrinologist or don't feel like they fully understand you, get another one. That's okay too. Um, you know, take a day off from workout if you need to, because we're playing the long game. We're not looking to do something for 6 weeks and that be done. Like we're looking for longevity and health. And that's a consistent commitment. Um, so again, you need to take a day off. Take a day off. It's okay. It's okay to rest because your body's telling you need to rest. Even if the people around you are like, "Oh, well, you slept for 9 hours. Why do you need a nap?" It's like, I don't know, but I'm just real tired. I just need that extra rest right now. Whether it's the mental fatigue or the physical fatigue that something the day before with your type 1 is caused. Again, it's okay to take that rest. It's okay to stand up for yourself and be like, I'm not feeling it. It's probably a big explanation as to why. You probably don't want to hear it, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna put myself through that stress, or I just need a break from it right now. So yeah, give yourself grace to handle that and reach out to somebody else in your community that has type 1 when you need it, because that's gonna be a big help too. Just having somebody around that understands, like, oh, I'm training for my climb, but I've had really crappy blood sugars for the week and I don't really know what to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like reach out to people,
Yeah.
because somebody will have had that experience and can, say, well, I did this and it did not work for me, or, hey, I'm sorry, I feel you. Sometimes you just want somebody that understands to give you that verbal affirmation that they really do understand. And that's always nice too.
It is, and the whole purpose of the T1 Determined initiative and this podcast is for me personally to learn. I have questions. I know a lot, but you know a lot as well, and you can probably tell me that there's so much that you don't know. I think the learning process is huge, and I really love your idea of combining structure, the combination of structure with flexibility.
Right.
So have your workout plans, have it in the calendar, know what you're going to do, but create a workout plan or a training program that is flexible.
Right.
So when you do take that day off, you take 2 or 3 days off, it's not destroyed. The training program isn't destroyed. You don't have to worry that it's destroyed. So you can listen to yourself. I think that's a wonderful takeaway. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, Leanna, I want to again thank you for the wealth of knowledge that you have brought to us today. You have been managing this condition for 40 plus years, and it's clear that you know a lot about it and you're managing it the way that is the most healthiest for you. And you're an inspiration to myself, and I know you're going to be an inspiration to listeners. So again, I just want to thank you for your time and everything that you've shared with us today.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun just talking about this with somebody that understands. And, if anybody can get one small little, nugget of wisdom or piece of, affirmation or inspiration out of this, then, it's worth it.
That's the goal. And the final question I have is, and you're talking a lot about support. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you to ask for support, to talk to you? I encourage everybody listening to Undetermined to especially reach out to me, but if they want to reach out to you and talk to you about what they're doing, especially with CrossFit and fitness, or anything in general, where's the best place to reach you?
So Instagram's probably going to be the best place to reach me. It's Leabrook425, and that's LEABROOKE 425. You can always reach out, send me an instant message. If you have a question that or you just want somebody to ask, like, hey, how do I start going from like walking every day to start lifting weights? I'll be glad to share what worked for me and what didn't work for me. Always happy to help anybody else if I can. So yeah, that's going to be the best way to reach me. Just send me a message.
Wonderful. Thank you. We will include the Instagram in the comments. So I appreciate that, and I know our listeners will too. So thank you
Great.
very much, Leanna.
Hey, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Leanna, for sharing your powerful journey. Your story is a testament to the discipline and resilience required to transform a life of restrictions into one of empowerment. You can follow and reach out to Leanna directly at Leabrook425, LEABROOKE 425. For all our content, please visit T1Determined.net. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Instagram, TikTok, and X at T1D_endurance, and Facebook at T1 Determined. Until next time, keep pushing your limits. I hope this helps. Stay strong, stay determined. T1 Determined.